Welcome to the CheckRare Brief, your weekly roundup of the biggest developments in rare disease.
Each week, we explain why those stories matter, not just to one specialty, but across the entire rare disease community.
From the latest clinical trials and conference highlights to important FDA decisions, we'll help you stay up to date in just a few minutes. I'm James Radke.
I'm Peter Suzuki.
And I'm Madeline Spencer. This is the CheckRare Brief. The FDA granted accelerated approval to Bristol Myers Squibb for Zenbexus to treat patients with relapsed or refractory multiple myeloma. Jim, what does this approval mean for patients?
Zenbexus is a cereblon E3 ligase modulator, and it represents a new therapeutic class to treat multiple myeloma. So patients have an additional option to target this cancer. The approval was largely based on data from the EXCALIBER phase 3 study that showed patients taking the drug had almost double the outcome response compared to the control group. What's interesting is the outcome measure in question was minimal residual disease, which is a new measure where they're looking for if no cancers are present in the sample that they take. This is the first cancer therapy to have approval based on this primary outcome measure, as opposed to the more overall survival or progression-free survival that is sort of the standard. So this approval represents two new trends in cancer. One, a new therapeutic class, and two, a new outcome measure that the FDA approves of.
Peter, this drug received an accelerated approval. What does that mean?
Accelerated approval is basically a way for the FDA to get promising drugs to patients sooner based on early evidence that the treatment is likely to provide a clinical benefit. That company then has to continue studying the drug to confirm the benefits. That doesn't mean the FDA skips safety review. Zenbexus does carry boxed warnings, but overall, the drug was generally well tolerated in clinical trials and showed meaningful results. So this is a promising new option for patients with multiple myeloma. And there's another reason this story is interesting to the rare disease community. If you're at a major hematology meeting, American Society of Hematology, ASH, multiple myeloma probably doesn't sound or look like a rare disease, but it is. About 200,000 Americans are living with myeloma, making it the second most common blood cancer, but still classified as a rare disease. And unlike many rare diseases that typically affect children, multiple myeloma primarily affects older Americans. So it's a good reminder that rare disease isn't just about pediatric or ultra-rare conditions. There are also single rare diseases that affect hundreds of thousands of adults.
In other regulatory news, the FDA gave ITM a complete response letter for their radiopharmaceutical agent ITM-11. Jim, what is ITM-11?
ITM-11 refers to a radioisotope, lutetium-177, that's being attached to a peptide that emits beta radiation, and it's targeting tumors. In this case, it was used to target neuroendocrine tumors. The clinical data seemed very impressive. The progressive-free survival was 24 months in the ITM-11 group and only 14 months in the control group, who received Afinitor, a standard therapy for neuroendocrine tumors. So the FDA's concern wasn't that the drug failed to show efficacy. The real issue seemed to be whether the product could be manufactured consistently and reliably and safely.
Peter, what is a complete response letter?
A complete response letter, or CRL, means the FDA has identified issues that need to be addressed before the application can move forward. It is a setback, but it does not necessarily mean the drug has been rejected permanently. The company can address the FDA's concerns and resubmit the application. In this case, though, the concern appears to be related to manufacturing rather than the drug's clinical efficacy. So if the manufacturing issues can be resolved, the company could potentially move forward with the FDA. This is an important issue across all rare diseases, as we are seeing more highly specialized therapies like these. Getting from the successful clinical trial to an approved treatment isn't just about demonstrating that the drug works. Companies also have to be able to manufacture these therapies consistently and reliably and at the scale needed to reach patients. For patients with rare diseases, that distinction can be especially important. A promising therapy doesn't help patients if there are barriers to actually producing and delivering it.
Our final story involves new concerns about VYKAT XR, a drug approved for Prader-Willi syndrome. Jim, what is the concern?
The concern has to do with excessive fluid retention that occurs in some patients taking VYKAT. The drug was approved last year to treat children with Prader-Willi syndrome to better control their hunger. But with any new drug, especially one approved for a very rare condition like Prader-Willi, it is important to make physicians aware of the drug's safety and efficacy in the real-world setting following a drug approval, as opposed to the very controlled clinical trials that led to that approval. And in the past year, real-world evidence, according to the Foundation of Prader-Willi Research, is showing that fluid retention may happen in some patients, and that can lead to other serious adverse events like cardiac and breathing problems. Now, with all that said, Prader-Willi syndrome is a devastating rare disease, and this treatment is very helpful. These children have severe and uncontrollable hunger, and this drug really helps control those hunger urges so that families don't have to lock up their fridges and cupboards. But you still have to look at the bigger picture. The drug may work, but it can also create other concerns, and that has to be investigated. And the only way to do that is to assess the real-world data following its approval.
Peter, what's the bigger issue here for the rare disease community?
The bigger issue for the rare disease community is that when a drug is approved for an ultra-rare disease, clinical trials may involve relatively small number of patients. That makes what happens after approval, when the drug is being used by a much larger and a more diverse group of patients, especially important. That's why real-world evidence and ongoing safety monitoring are so important. Pharmaceutical companies, researchers, advocacy groups, and physicians all have a role in identifying new information and making sure it gets back to the medical community. So while these safety concerns are certainly important, identifying and communicating them is also an important part of how the system is supposed to work. Drug approval isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of our understanding of how these treatments perform in the real world.
Before we wrap up, here's what we'll be watching this week. Several PDUFA dates are coming up, including Capricor's deramiocel for Duchenne muscular dystrophy on August 22nd, Ultragenyx's DTX401 for glycogen storage disease type 1A on August 23rd, Xbray's Dosanac for 2 forms of leukemia, CML and ALL on August 25th.
The headlines change every week, but our mission stays the same: to help you understand what's happening across the rare disease community.
If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join us next week for another edition of the CheckRare Brief.